He came to the Senate as a renowned university professor, best known for teaching West Indian literature at the University of the West Indies and abroad in the US and England. But as an independent senator who first served in a temporary appointment in 1981, Professor Kenneth Ramchand never went by the book. Always fearless and outspoken, he supported a wide range of bills, not just bills regarding education. From cricket to crime, the environment and equal opportunities legislation, Professor Ken Ramchand proved to be a fierce debater and a champion of important and sometimes unpopular social and political issues important for the development and preservation of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, undoubtedly, the most important bill that I debated and took part in was the Planning and Development of Land Bill. We did this for about 3 years, the last 3 years of one of the UNC governments. Stalwarts in that debate were Professor Spence and Professor Kenny. And although I did not have the expertise that they had, I gave full support to them because I understood, and I still understand, that the Planning and Development of Land Bill, it was virtually a bill which would make you look at the whole of Trinidad, and you would shade off red, never to be touched for building or construction, natural reserve, wham, only to be used for agriculture. Here you may do building. It will be a blueprint, it will be a map of the whole island telling you what you use the land for. And if for any reason you needed to go against that, you'd have to go to Parliament, come out in the open and argue for it, that it was a matter of national importance that we deviate from the Planning and Development of Land Bill.
The bill was shelved, and Ramchand got a valuable lesson in fighting for important legislation, no matter what the outcome. Dr. Ramchand pressed forward on controversial issues. Was the P&M government's decision to end sugar production. Dr. Ramchand remembers the committee report on ending sugar production.
When the committee reported, I should have been a good boy and kept quiet, but I made it clear when the committee reported that I didn't agree with the report. I didn't bring out all my other disagreements, but I really was not happy with it. So it was an intervention that had no result, but it was one where I felt I really had to follow my conscience. And for the record, 50 years from now, when they decide to go back to sugar, they will say at least one fella stood up and said, this is a terrible mistake.
There is no doubt that Professor Ramchand had a unique viewpoint as an independent senator. His stand on issues undoubtedly came from his own life experiences, a combination of his upbringing and his education. Born in Cedros, he attended school at Point Fortin Intermediate RC School.
Poor people really do a lot to make their children get educational opportunities. And the children had to put up with a lot too. Because I had to lie down on the floor of a PH, because my mother got a free ride for me from Cedros to Point. So I couldn't sit down in the seat. The fella couldn't afford to lose passengers. So I sit down on the floor, going to Point and coming back. And then after that, I stayed by some relatives where, I had to work for me keep like. But, you had the determination and your parents had the determination. And then after that, well, you get your exhibition. And then I went to Naparima College, which was another kind of experience that led to all kinds of growths, because for the first time I was meeting boys from all different parts of the island, and we were living together in the dormitory. And we had this contrast between the dormitory boys and the town boys, and the exposure to San Fernando, the exposure to the girls at La Peak High School, the church, and all kinds of things like that. So after that, I went to Edinburgh University. And again, in those days, even when I was staying in Point, I couldn't go home every weekend. We just couldn't afford it. Staying in San Fernando, it was even worse. And then when we went abroad, when my generation went abroad, when you go, you're not coming back for another 4 years.
His education, both studying and teaching abroad, made Professor Ramchand even more determined to give back to Trinidad and Tobago. Rafiq Shah, who served in Parliament, describes Dr. Ramchand as a man of letters. Someone, he says, like Speaker Tomasas, or in line with Dr. Eric Williams, who straddled the intellectual barriers and fences, they are not constrained by the narrowness of a bill or a debate.
Senator Ramchand was appointed an independent senator, and being a man of letters in the sense that he was a professor in charge of the English department at the university, I think he brought something different to Parliament, so that somebody like Senator Ramchand will have brought to bear in Parliament a completely different perspective from people who are otherwise qualified. He himself was part of the history of the country in the sense that he was tutored by the greats like C.L.R. James and so on outside of his university education. He would have brought something to the table that the average person plucked out of a workplace or a political party did not bring.
Of course, members of Parliament did look towards Dr. Ramchand to lead discussion in matters regarding education.
If we were dealing with education, obviously we go to Professor Ramchand as the professor in the university, and he was dealing with education. He used to be on the textbook committee, and he was on several committees dealing with education before he even came into the Senate. So obviously we would go with his type of experience and expertise.
Every year I'm strong on agriculture. Every year I'm strong on education. If I have one point on education I'll bring up is that the primary school is the foundation of all later education, and is the foundation for the personality and character. That you can be wounded and damaged during that period, right? Between 0 and 12. All the bad things that are going to happen to you later in your life just get lodged in the first 12 years. That's the most formative period of your life. And a country has a right to spend tremendous resources on getting the primary school system right. And then for years, I would preach, I would take the budget occasion to talk about alternative energy. I said there is a life after oil and gas.
In many ways, Dr. Ramchand was the quintessential independent senator. Outspoken, unbiased, and confident in his views, a Trinidadian who made his fellow parliamentarians ponder over serious issues and sometimes even laugh at them.
Well, apart from his sense of humor, he, it's difficult to, well, one of the things I remembered was that we had, during our time in the Parliament, and he and I were there from 1995 to 2007 with the little breaks for elections and so on, but we were reappointed. We were first appointed by President Noor Hassan Ali, and then President Robinson, and then President George Maxwell Richards. And so we were there, and I remember us, he loved cricket. He loved cricket, and he would talk about his cricket days, and I used to tease him and say, well, cricket, coconut, head, bat and lime, and so on. But we had a cricket match, parliamentarians cricket match. I see where they want to bring it back this year, 2011. And he was there, and I was impressed with his cricketing prowess. He was very good in the field and so on. So he really, impressed me that he was sort of an all-rounder. But he was fun to be sitting next to, and I really was impressed with what he brought to the Senate. I was impressed with his genuine assistance to people who would seek his advice.
During his tenure in Parliament, he will have really looked in detail and will have added a human face to what may have been material discussions. Because of his background, his social background, he's I think originally a Cedrus person coming from the countryside, went all the way to England to be educated at some of the highest, better universities in the world. And yet he would be grounding with the masses, as it were, and understanding the ordinary person and what the ordinary person required. So as a consequence of that, any bill that came before Parliament during his era, he would have made a contribution that would be second to none.
Looking back on his parliamentary service, Professor Ramchand has many memorable moments. He remembers one in particular.
I think the most important committee I served on, I can't even remember its name. It was a joint parliamentary committee which was considering what to do with Caroni lands and what would be the policy about Caroni lands given the government's wrong decision to close down Caroni. So there was I, somebody who opposed the closing down, being on a committee to try and decide how to distribute the land. I gave a little trouble on the committee, saying that you can't decide what you want to do with the land unless you get a reliable soil survey. You can't go and give away prime agricultural land for houses and buildings. And so you have to mark it off and say, okay, these are the agricultural lands which have to be preserved for agriculture. If any of the land is going to be used for any other purpose, it could only be these parts. So that question was never resolved.
He found a way to make his voice heard in Parliament, sometimes in a most innovative way. For Dr. Ramchand, it was important to bring certain issues to the forefront.
I think I was one of the few fellows who found a way that if I wanted to say something about education and it was a bill about banking, I remember again and say, Mr. President, people say I always like to digress. So this is a bill about finance. And if I got up and said that the primary schools in our country are in a state of decrepitude and something has to be done about it, somebody on the other side is going to get up and say I'm irrelevant. So I will stick to the bill, Mr. President. But I don't say what I want to say.
He came to the Senate unexpectedly with a temporary appointment by President Hassan Ali in the Third Republic Parliament, 1987 through 1991, and remained an independent senator from 1992 through 2007 in the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th Republican Parliament. During his time in the Senate, he garnered many accolades. In August 2001, Professor Kenneth Ramchand was appointed Professor Emeritus in West Indian Literature by the University of the West Indies, and he was awarded the Trinidad and Tobago Chiconia Medal Gold for Literature, Education and Culture in 1996. He was appointed President and Chairman of the University of Trinidad. Among all his achievements, Professor Ramchand will be remembered for his contributions to Trinidad and Tobago's Parliament, where he brought a wealth of experience to many chapters of Trinidad and Tobago political history.